Module 5, the Baroque period. The term Baroque comes from the Portuguese word barroco, which means misshapen pearl. Music is described as highly decorated, which reflects on the elaborate nature and complexity of the music compositions. Others have likened Baroque music to listening to multiple people having a conversation all at the same time. Over time, Baroque would also be applied to other forms of fine art, including architecture. There is not agreement as to when the Baroque era began. Some argue around 1750 and others say around 1600. The Baroque era ended around the middle of the 18th century. There were many advances in knowledge and changes in culture. This includes the Protestant Reformation. Politically and culturally, Europe had turned towards rationalism and humanism to guide policies and philosophy. Scientists had begun using the scientific method and more closely studying the world around them. Changes of the Renaissance had a strong impact on the Baroque period. Scientists pushed society's notions about the physics of the Earth and the universe beyond Earth. Philosophers built upon and challenged ideas from the Renaissance. European countries began to expand their territories by colonizing some of the places they had discovered during the previous centuries. A mechanical calculator and calculus were invented. The discoveries and changes in society would also extend to the music of the Baroque period. The music of the Baroque period is the first to be among the musical pieces that people today are generally familiar with. Characteristics of Baroque music. Composers and musicians during this time thought of themselves more as craftsmen than artists. Some composers also worked as music tutors, composing easier compositions for their students. They often made their living through patrons, individuals who supported them in exchange for their music. The music of the period was often composed for specific circumstances, whether it was a party or a religious event. This is considered disposable music. The composers of the era would probably be very surprised to learn how often and in how many different circumstances their music is played today. Figured bass is also known as thorough bass. It is a musical notation using numbers to indicate chords, intervals, and other aspects in relation to the bass note of the music. The numbers were generally placed under the bass line to indicate the intervals that the bass note should use. Basso continuo is the harmony of the music. An instrument that was capable of playing chords played the basso continuo, such as the harpsichord, organ, or harp. Ornamentation is the use of non-necessary musical flourishes such as trills and grace notes added to the basic melody or harmony. At the bottom of the slide, you see numbers underneath the bass line. These are examples of figured bass. The modern orchestra was developed during the Baroque period. Orchestras are larger instrumental pieces or groups that contain brass, string, percussion, and woodwind instruments. When we think of classical music today, we often think of the music played by orchestras. Although orchestras developed before the Baroque period, it was not until this time that composers actually began to write music specifically for the orchestra. Many of the instruments that made up orchestras during this period are instruments that we would recognize as being played today. The stringed instruments that were common today in orchestras, such as violins and the cello, were created during the Baroque period. Pianos were also developed from earlier keyboard instruments. Forms of Baroque music, operas and oratorios. Opera is a dramatic work in which singers and musicians combine a musical score and text. Opera means work in Italian and began at the very end of the 16th century in Italy. Opera buffa, the comedic or humorous opera. Opera seria is very stylized and puts a greater emphasis on the experienced and masterful singer. Oratorios were similar to operas, except they did not use scenery in the performance. Another difference between operas and oratorios was the subject matter. Operas often dealt with the history and mythology, using themes of romance and deception. Oratorios were often based on sacred topics. The instrument suite. The instrument suite is a series of dances, and each part is different, but they are all connected as parts of the whole suite. The different parts of the instrumental suite include the prelude. This is a shorter piece with no dancing. The allemande, which is the first dance, and it has a moderate tempo and was derived from German dances. The courante. This piece is a triple meter, fast-paced dance. The word literally means running. The saraband, the jig, the instrument suite can also include the hornpipe, minuet, gavotte, air, bourrée, and pavane. Many Baroque composers are well known today. Some examples include Claudio Monteverdi. He was a transitional figure between the Renaissance and Baroque period. His work serves as the point where Renaissance music ends and Baroque music begins. He was born in 1567 in Italy. He wrote one of the earliest operas and the Ottavo Libro. He died in 1643. Antonio Vivaldi is regarded by many to be one of the greatest composers during the Baroque period. He was an ordained priest, and this, along with his auburn hair, earned him the nickname the Red Priest. He's widely regarded for his violin mastery. He was born in 1678 in Italy, and one of his most notable works is the Four Seasons. He died in 1741. Johann Sebastian Bach is regarded as the world's greatest composer of all time. He composed both sacred and secular works. By 1749, he began to experience failing eyesight. A renowned British eye surgeon performed corrective surgery on the composer, but Bach was completely blind after the surgery. There are over 50 notable musicians in his family, including his own sons. He was born in 1685 in Germany. Some of his notable works include Air from the Orchestral Suite No. 3 in D major, and he died in 1750. George Frederick Handel. Johann Sebastian Bach once said of George Frederick Handel, "He is the only person I would wish to see before I die, and the only person I would wish to be, were I not Bach." He did not expect to become a composer, but he studied law. After his father died in 1703, Handel abandoned his study of law in favor of music. He was born in 1685 in Germany. Some of his notable works include The Messiah, Water Music, and Music for the Rural Fireworks. He died in 1759.